Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. You know who it is. It's your boy Jay Hennigan. And you know what time it is. It's time for another episode of How to Kill a Sacred Cow. Tonight on the podcast we have the one and only Andreas Xirtus. You might know who he is by now, I'm sure you've heard him on other shows, but you ain't never heard him like you're going to hear him tonight. So, for those of you who don't know who Andreas is, he has worked for NASA. He's worked as a social media strategist for Turner Entertainment. That's CNN, HLN, all those media behemoths. And presently, he is the CSO at Timcast Media. So he works with Tim Pool, and he's working on a whole bunch of incredible stuff. He has a whole bunch of stuff on YouTube about Tartaria. I mean, we talked for an hour about psychological warfare and predictive programming in the culture, and we talked a little bit of history, and we didn't even get to Tartaria, which is what I brought him on the show to talk about. I brought him to the show under the auspices that I was going to ask him questions about Tartaria. Didn't even get there. Totally forgot that was the reason that I even brought him. But the conversation, nonetheless, is incredibly stimulating, is one of my favorite thus far, and I'm very happy to present him to you. And I'm not even going to make this a very long intro because I just want to get right into it. So, if anybody wants to help out the podcast, check out the homepage at www.howtokillasacredcow.com. And I'm sure there's an HTTP dot with some dashes in front of there, but I'm sure you could figure this internet thing out if you haven't already. But you can go to the homepage and you can subscribe to Audible. You'll find that at the bottom of the homepage, or you can go to the library section of the website and you can buy any one of the fantastic books from the authors that I've had on the show thus far. I'm going to expand that a little bit more in the future, and I'm going to include a suggestion. A suggested reading section. So I'm very happy with the way the website's turning out. I'm really trying to get this webmaster thing figured out because I'm doing everything on my own. So, I'm doing my best. Please, cut me some slack, all right? Now, without any further ado, Andreas Xirtus. Is it Exodus or Xirtus?
Yes, I agree.
Both.
Yeah, I mean, it's like so virtus would be like the old Latin for virtue, and then X is, like my pronoun. So we're at a point now where it's Xirtus, but Xirtus. I think it's a lot of people who took French instead of Spanish say Xirtus, and that's fine. That's fine. But Xirtus is usually how I would say it.
All right, Xirtus. Andreas Xirtus, the great Andreas Xirtus. We just spoke for the last 15 minutes, and we weren't even recording, and I felt like I learned more than I've learned all week.
Thank God. I appreciate that was all, because that was like a boom, boom, boom moment. I'm glad it wasn't recorded because I feel like it would frighten some people. So I'm
not going to lie. I'm a little scared. I am a little scared.
Yeah, that's all right, though. Me too. I mean, people who say they aren't afraid don't have the courage necessary to face their fears. So.
Well put. Well put. So as a jumping off point for this conversation, I had asked you if you had seen How to Stay at Home by Goofy. So Goofy had these series of...
Right. Sorry, I had seen that. I thought you meant something else besides Disney's Goofy. No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So he had a series of shorts in the 50s, in the 40s and 50s, like how to swim, how to play baseball, how to ski. So in 2020, Disney decided to make How to Stay at Home. They're 3 one-minute shorts. One of them is how to binge watch. The other is how to cook at home, how to stay at home, how to wear a mask. And so this, to me, seemed very much like a predictive programming or a psychological operation, so to speak, coming out of Disney, the very people that decided, they were going to use Donald Duck to sell war bonds. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a beautiful conclusion or intuition that you had. Now, maybe there's a little bit of a gradient there between psychological operation, which, we all know, Mockingbird, CIA, Disney, the connections between Watergate and the Church Committee hearings. And if you don't, look into the Church Committee hearings. But on the other side of that, there's the occult, and there's, rich people love to put on a ritual, especially a prophecy. If you get something in a book and it says something's supposed to happen on Nostradamus's favorite birthday or whatever, the rich guy wants to do it on that day so he can say, isn't it neat that there's a comet on top of my, patio? And that's basically how people ran the world for thousands of years. Someone has this celestial bureaucracy. They can predict the weather, and they can make some sort of a ritual, to show that they deserve it. Because a ritual doesn't have to be a violent act. It can be, and then just sacrifices and this and that. It's not always a crisis act. It can be a crisis art, but not all of it's just pure psychological operation, because that would imply that they don't necessarily believe, or that they strictly don't believe what the psychological operation is about. It could very well be you've got a group of evangelicals that have loved Thelema and Theosophy and Rosicrucian mythology for so long that they think that this is the way to issue it. For instance, Pluto and Goofy are associated with the Canine, the Sirius stars, and you've got the Canine A, Canine B. And the Capricorn goat was replaced by Pluto, but Goofy shows up as sort of an alternative to Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, because you have Horus or Thoth a lot of the time for Donald Duck, because it's this, the white, ibis kind of duck. And then you also have Goofy, who is Seth, which is chaos, and sometimes Anubis, but that's more of the Bruno guy. Was it Bluto? I always get the Popeye character confused with the neighbor of Goofy.
Is it Bruno?
Bruno. There you go. Bruno.
Yeah.
Right. Which is also, Bruno was a doubting philosopher who looked at and judged the Galileo, idea of the sun, the center of the earth. This is something I was looking into recently. Besides the idea that Galileo Galilei is probably an anonymized name of a group that was studying, a priest that were studying things, because it's Galileo of Galilee. It's there's a lot of story around the court trials the Catholics had. And it's actually not so much that he said that science is wrong. It's more that today's science, okay, the Catholic Church believed at the time that things were perfect spheroids because God made them. And then he said, no, they're not necessarily perfect spheroids, which is interesting on and of itself. But then they said, well, what about these craters? Could the craters be perfect? And he said, yeah, but who's to say they are? And there was more and more they were upset about his pear-shaped ology of reality. So at some point, though, the church had this character Bruno, and Bruno had said, hey, actually look at the way stars are aligning. And in terms of the size, it makes more sense with there being this heliocentric, and then Zorka. So back to Goofy. Goofy is supposed to represent between chaos and order, Ma'at, which is order, chaos. And so Goofy would constantly show you what not to do. You've got this person who drops his car in the ocean, and it iron oxidates and rusts instantly. So you see, okay, well, these are the problems. These are the Hegelian dialectical conclusions that happen. The way South Park will take something to its most extreme. You'll see in a Disney cartoon, the most extreme, if you're a kid, instantly, wow, if I did that, boom, 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 this would happen. So it's trying to teach you the consequences, not right and wrong, but chaos and order, right? Not knowing and, ignorance being bliss. But Goofy now isn't really showing you what to do wrong. It seems like it seemed more of a how to do things right. But when you mess up the thing, then you can see everyone's freaking out. Right now, if you go to a restaurant, Tim went into a restaurant the other day, and they said everyone's sitting down without any mask on. They say you have to wear a mask. It's wait a second, no one else is wearing a mask. Well, yeah, but they sat down and had a drink, and now they can. So wait, when you're sitting down, you don't need to wear a mask when your mouth is open and you're spitting on each other. But when you're walking around in all these random places, so you start to see more and more that it's a ritual, and you're trying to show people this way of behavior, but it's not just a psychological operation. I mean, if it was, then why did Sharia enforce it? We're at a point now where we're clearly building this, and the Tao is always trying to repeat something that was originally with good intention and out of love, but it becomes a ritual. We're at this point where we're pretending that this makes sense. That's how we'll end up always wearing masks. It'll become a cultural thing long after disease is dealt away with, because this just becomes standard practice. It's been done in other cultures. And it's interesting because you saw how hard it was for France to accept that mask as part of, Afro-France. I mean, France is not this little country. It controls islands all over the world. It has huge Muslim populations in Africa. And, at a certain point, as France has become more and more French, it's the other way around. Parts of France have gone to the center of France. So they've had such a hard time dealing with this culture that they've grabbed up until COVID. Now they can say, hey, this is not just for religion, this is for science. So I feel like I hope that's kind of my point on the gradient there with Disney and why they do everything the way they do. The other thing is Disney's always been a magic company. They talk very much about this today, but even originally Walt Disney was a Rosicrucian. He went to these interesting, wearing coats and these cool fraternal orders and thought, yeah, this would be something he could extend, having Club 33 and Club 23 even at Disneyland. But Disney was probably killed, right? Like I don't know how else to put that. He bought a bunch of land secretly in Florida and basically built his own county, which was the New Berlin. It's going to be a skyport for trade. And eventually announced it. It took him only 2 months after telling the world that he bought the land to die, though. And all of a sudden, he just, boom, dies of supposedly cancer, and then is frozen and probably like left in Missouri. There's some talk of him being under CalArts, but I bet you it's under his hometown because he bought it right by the railroad tracks and his energy there. And Missouri is also where they had the first fastest gigabit, 10 times gigabit Ethernet dark fiber. So there's a lot of things going on in Missouri. But Walt Disney himself, not the same as modern Disney company. So the idea that Walt Disney is, he had tried to make movies. The unions had stopped him. He went and reported the union members who were his animators to the FBI. And then the OSS, who became the CIA, took over Disney. Like they went in there, made him start to inform and tell on people, make movies and secret films for the government about all sorts of things, about how to run an engine or how to geoengineer weather, right? You can go look at Periscope films and you can check out my exertion. I have a couple old banned or classified or declassified Disney cartoons that are literally just for the military or specific intelligence agencies. And he did it. He did what he had to do. He wasn't super happy about it. You could tell. And there's moments there. He went to South America. The Three Caballeros is a cartoon. He went down to South America during World War II and got all these animators in Brazil and from Argentina. At some point, Disney was running around the earth doing crazy things for basically the government. But after Disney disappears, the Mickey Mouse, disappears is a good word because we don't know for sure. And I'm not saying he's frozen. I just really hope he is. I think it's just so much better of a story. He's got the Wet Enterprises. He has all the technology he needs to do it. Let him have it if he did it. But after Disney disappears, Walt Disney Company becomes a completely different thing. You've got the MK Ultra Mickey Mouse Club kind of kids, which you're familiar with so many of them, Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, and was Christina Aguilera one. So many kids are. And then now it's even weirder because you've got Disney kids like Bella Thorne who are writing books about what they did to her. So there's a transparency there to what is happening at the Disney company, which they almost got rid of the Disney name. They thought for a long time, why would we even call ourselves Disney anymore? But they realized the branding was there. And part of it is also the giant backwards G and just the amount of work he did to turn around. I don't know if everyone got what I meant by that, by the way. When you're a little kid and they open the Disney logo and you're like, that's not a D, it's a backwards G. Like, oh no, it is a D. That's on purpose. Like all these little things that Disney has put in front of us. It used to be, like Donald Duck in Mathmagic Land. It was, I hope you've all seen the cartoon where Donald Duck learns from the spirit of adventure. And he goes through a Masonic ritual dressed as Alice in Wonderland so he can play billiards better and understand the secrets of math and pentagrams. Think of a pentagram, Donald. Donald Duck in Mathmagic Land seems a little auspicious, but it's not really evil. No, it's kind of saying, hey, behind the guise of evil, it's more Aleister Crowley. It's like you think it's evil, but if you looked past that, you'd see good and evil or chaos and order. And that now Disney's straight up saying, if you think it's evil, it's good. The new Disney company has made so much effort. Like Wizards of Waverly Place is a show where there's no doing the right thing for the right reason. It's always doing the most selfish thing has the best conclusion for everyone through Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism in the Panopticon. That's a very different kind of Disney. So I think that's why the mask shorts with Goofy are so they're so off because they miss that esoteric value.
Yeah, it seems that's why. Yeah,
I was like, how did I do? That was a good rant, right?
Very good. 10 minutes straight. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring that up, is because it seemed like such straightforward propaganda. They slipped right past that usual Disney occultist type of bend that they usually
Super
try
bummer,
to put.
right?
Yeah, I was looking for a little bit of magic, maybe some square and compass hanging around, some nothing. It was just straight, stay at home, put on a mask. This is how you do it. And then one of the creepy things actually is there's a moment where he's sitting there binge watching TV, and the door he gets door dashed basically, and he puts on his mask, but his head stays in the chair while his body goes and gets the food and comes back, which speaks to what you were just talking about, where Tim went into a restaurant, everyone's not wearing the mask, but you have to wear the mask so that you can walk over there and sit down. And that really, it's totally illogical, but like you said, it's a ritual. It's very much meant, and I think a lot of it is to create that purposeful cognitive dissonance so that people get traumatized in their own way, because most people are weak enough to get traumatized by that bullshit anyway, so that you're more pliable for the suggestions later on, which are the more, almost insidious ones. Take this vaccine. You're not going to be able to work without doing this, that, or the other thing. And that's just like, and that's where I wanted to get into the conversation with you about the psychological operations, is because like this is the craziest psychological operation I've seen yet, and I've studied quite a few, if you know what I'm saying, as it seems like you have as well. So where you worked for NASA and you worked for CNN, and I'm sure you encountered your share of psychological operations. Can you speak on anything you're comfortable speaking about?
Oh, the black hole thing. I was Flight 370. Like, give me like acknowledgement for Flight
Malaysia,
370. CNN had like just asked me. My boss at the time, Bert de Brouw, was a genius man. I love this guy, and he invented the Jerry Springer show. And he was being used to try to save them at the last moment. And he was thinking, okay, here's what we got to do and all these other things. But he's asking me, because I was put in charge of social media strategy for CNN and HLN and all these like Turner Network program things. And they said, okay, well, how would you cover Flight 370? And I was like, well, where in the world is Flight 370 #Carmen San Diego or something like that? And they're like, that's too close to a joke. You can't do that. These people could be missing. Why don't you put, and again, I'm from the internet, so I don't mean to be a troll, like I'm just maybe like a little shell shocked from the meme wars or something, but like, I'm not trying to be mean. But then these guys say, well, could you say, is a mental illness behind what happened to Flight 370 going missing? Maybe the pilot had a mental illness, some kind of thing like that. Did the pilot have a mental illness that caused Flight 370 to go down? And that became trending for them, saying, CNN, this is stupid. Like, Dr. Drew, you're crazy. Like, HLN, stop it. Basically, and then they told me once a week to fly to tell them what was going on, because you got Georgia and Hollywood, and you got to go back and forth and tell them about the internet and what's going on at TV. But then they have you go say twice so you can tell them, actually, here's the deal. You don't get to delete that tweet you asked me to delete. I can delete your copy, but I can't delete everyone else's. And this is what the future is, where these people are no longer your mob audience that can be replaced with other puppets. They are now users with track records and names like Nielsen ratings, right? And they're going to become almost celebrities in and of themselves as reviewers. They're going to replace Hollywood reviewers. And just trying to explain it to them, I'm like, it's not that bad. It's going to be okay. But you're no longer going to be half of TV. You're going to have to just be a few channels on the internet. You could be the best at what you do, And then I'm still being encouraging. I'm like, it's going to work out. We're going to be fine. And then they basically shut down. I mean, CNN from 2015 is a completely new beast. It's just as evil, and it's just got the same kinds of problems in some ways. But, they got rid of Piers Morgan, and they got rid of, I think Dr. Drew even, right? And so, I was there at the moment where they were still kind of pretending to be a real business. It's like when they're doing the laundering of money, but they at least still have if you walked in, they could give the guy a soup and make it look like they still have something going on there. I mean, at this point, I don't think that any of it's left. It's at all. It's so vapid now. But we dealt with a lot of issues like that, where something we knew more about it and we couldn't say anything because we could get in trouble for it. And I mean, because they can sue you if you can't prove a thing, or if you have to redact it, and that stopped mattering. After I left, clearly, like, you can now just retracto the correctional alpaca, everything. But at the time, if I had said, hey, around Malaysia, we know that there's this island called Diego Garcia. And that's part of the Carmen Sandiego joke, is that Diego Garcia is an island the British government own and lease, again, with, these little things. You think France is this little thing, and England's all over the place, has all these places, controls so much. They had this island, and it's being rented to the CIA, kind of like a Guantanamo Bay, and also a Carmen Sandiego spy training center. So it seemed like a good shot. Plus, who was involved with the plane? Who was on the plane? Well, so many of the people on the plane were for Freescale Semiconductor. And so I thought, okay, what were they up to? Right before it, they were talking about how they built this Malaysian tech team. They're working on all these drone UAV patents. And I was thinking UFOs or something. But next month, Volvo says they're going to start paying insurance for self-driving cars. If your self-driving car crashes, because the self-driving car is driving, the company's driving. So the company will pay the insurance. So we realized that, and also because certain patents went open and that could be purchased because of Tesla that purchased self-driving patents as well, that had been involved with Freescale Semiconductor. These were patents that these men and women who are working on this plane would have owned if they hadn't all died collectively. But now the patents go to the company. Little things like that, not necessarily going to lead to the end conclusion, but none of those things got mentioned. And so that was a big problem, I felt like, at the time, just working with CNN. NASA was kind of the opposite. I feel like I'm still dealing with people not knowing things they taught me in 2007, right? So, for instance, the moon is in the Earth's atmosphere. I think 2017, they finally published papers that conclusively pointed this out, but we were just being taught that in 2007. Ideas about, gravity being a misunderstood description of the electromagnetic disturbance, the Michelson-Morley experiment of ether turning out to actually mean the exact opposite of what everything's been taught. The idea that ether does exist. There's just so many levels to what we were allowed to believe, because it was like 1984, 2 + 2 = 4 in this room. You can't outside, but right in here, we're allowed to think about those things. So it's also interesting how many people can say to themselves, oh yeah, I know what you mean, but you're not taking it in context. And they're able to put themselves in a box where they can handle 2 and 2 = 4 when it needs to, but normally it's 5. And so that's kind of the exciting thing about psychological operations. I have one more thought though, actually, on Goofy. So we were talking about the three Caballeros, and you said you wanted to see something that was super occulty, or, you were kind of missed out on it. Have you seen the Legend of the Neo Caballeros?
No, I haven't.
So a couple years ago, Disney Plus came out, right? And up until that point, there'd been this show no one could see. And it was I think 2012 or something like that, maybe 2016, but somewhere in there. But it was only like iTunes Philippines. You could get this show. And some people, I heard about this from autistic DuckTales fans on the internet who were reviewing episodes, because if you didn't notice, the DuckTales are all about mythology as well. And they have the Ask About Illuminati poster and everything. Plus they're dragons, that ducks are reptiles, birds are reptiles, and the whole thing about, what's a real reptile and what a dragon is, what dinosaurs have feathers. Like when you start to find out how deep this really goes and how DuckTales invented carbene, methylene, right? It's the first comic book to point out, if you look at things invented by DuckTales invents everything. It's a secret disclosure of DuckTales magazines from the 60s. There was a guy who learned how to save a boat from capsizing with ping pong balls in a tube because he saw it in a DuckTales comic, and he tried to patent it, and the Dutch wouldn't let him because they'd read the same comic book at that patent office. So they knew already it was from a DuckTales comic. I mean, this is how insidious DuckTales can be. But there's another duck show, and it's called The Three Caballeros. And I mentioned earlier the German World War II. Disney went down to South America, where there are in Argentina, and all these things are happening. So Disney made a show about that about 5 years ago, only showed people in iTunes Philippines, and then sort of just quietly released it all at the same time on Disney Plus. But it's Donald Duck has a band, and his band has two friends from South America, and they're the three caballeros, which are the horsemen. So you have the three horsemen instead of the four, but it's okay because all the gods are dead and are dying because they're old. And there's a new young goddess named Cassandra. Cassandra's the gift of the one who's been gifted the ability to give a prophecy. She knows all the truths of the future, but she can't be understood when she says it. And, Donald Duck can't be understood when he speaks, right? But he's got this band and they're playing shows at all of the Titans ruins, and the intro, and that's what I was thinking about when you mentioned you missed the compass and square. He's running from a minotaur on a checkered floor while the compass and square are being burnt with the sun coming over it, and there's like every kind of weird symbol in the first 30 seconds of the Legend of the Three Caballeros. But they have to go play music for all of the Titans to wake them up so they can bring forth the new goddess energy. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, it exists.
Oh yeah, I'm watching that this weekend. That's what's happening when I have my son over, because my son absolutely loves How to Stay at Home, and it's funny too and he's like, Dad, do you want to watch How to Stay at Home? Does it still creep you out? Because that's what I told him originally. I was like, no, dude, I don't want to watch it. That creeps me out. And he's like, it still creeps you out? Which creeps you? And I'm like, oh shit, I can't get it. I'm going to get in trouble with his mother about this. And yeah, no. So that, my whole family, we've been huge on Disney our whole lives. So when originally, maybe like 10, 15 years, oh yeah, probably like 15, 20 years ago now, where people started doing videos on, oh, look at the occult symbols here in this movie, and look at what's going on over here, and even just like small things like in The Rescuers Down Under, if you pause it at a certain freeze frame, you can see some pornography in one of the windows as they're falling down in the city or whatever.
That's that post-Disney stuff I'm talking about. Like when they write sex in the sky, that's new Disney, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so originally it was almost like a visceral reaction to it. Like, that's not true. Stay away from my Disney. And then, you kind of let it seep in there and you're like, holy shit. And it's everything too. You can go back to Snow White. You know what I mean?
It's not fair to blame. So here's the cool thing about it is like, think about Tim Burton. Like, part of his war story is he went insane drawing tween frames. That's where you draw, like, someone draws picture 1 and draws picture 24, or I think they do 18. But someone else draws frame 2 to 23, the tween for in between stuff. So he had to draw in between pictures, filling up all of the 101 Dalmatians over and over and over until like you become Tim Burton. So of course there's going to be animators that are kind of insane. And, Don Bluth was so angry when he was working at when Disney died, and then, Eisner destroyed the animation studio and moved them to another building. There's a great documentary for you, actually, Awaking Sleeping Beauty, which is all about the post Walt Disney period of animation and what happened there. It's actually pretty pro Disney, but it's still very useful information on it. But you're going to find also that, there's really deep stuff there. It's not bad. Like Fantasia has, Rosicrucian gods battling it out. And, not just the gods, but the Egyptian hippopotamus mothers and the ostrich and the crocodile gods, like all of the levels and the pantheons of Mount Olympus. Walt Disney does the oldest story of the apprentice and the magician, but the sorcerer's apprentice, but the sorcerer's name is Yensid, right? Which is Disney backwards. There's so much mirror to Disney. Like, it's actually beautiful that they do it.
Yeah, and I didn't actually mean to put it in a way like that I think it was ruined for me. It was just especially because you get it from that perspective. Everybody believes it to be evil. They're thinking, oh, this is that, and the other thing's happening because it's evil. It's like, well, nothing is that black and white. That kind of Manichaean binary thought process is not useful whatsoever. But it You can see, especially once he starts working for the OSS CIA, you can see the what is called predictive programming. You can see the psychological operations kind of aspect seeping into it as well. And
something about that song in Snow White, though, "Someday My Prince Will Come," always sat a little weird with me. I'm just
well, if you ever seen, I don't know if I got this from. I think I noticed this organically. There's that scene where the prince is singing to Snow White and she's out on her patio or on her porch or whatever like that, and he extends his, and then the branch is right in the phallic area, you know what I mean? And you go like, hey guys, chill out. It's a children's cartoon, or Pinocchio, where they don't come back boys. You know what I mean? They go to Pleasure Island and they don't come back boys. And to a certain extent, you're like, guys, tone it down a little bit. Like, my boy's watching.
But then, okay, so I'm doing stuff with kids now, like making doll houses and hanging out with my friends' kids and teaching them about Minecraft and whatever, like hanging out with, 7-year-olds, sometimes, and I'm noticing so many of them are afraid of stuff because they have been hypercensored. I'm from a generation where I put whatever metal cassette tape in my Teddy Ruxpin I wanted. But now you've got these kids they go on, they need to click on the kids mode or else they'll freak out because pictures are so terrifying. Every YouTube picture is someone going like, because they want to like get people to click on the fact that they bought a balloon. That's me, by the way. I'm Cass Castle. Sorry. But that's what's going on. It's freaking out these kids. So we need to also understand, like, they're so hyper traumatized. We're also getting a level where should we ever show kids anything? Like, oh, don't show kids that. And that can be bad too. I feel better that I saw through these things, that I saw movies that made me question and psychoanalyze things that other people would just blindly trust. I guess blind trust is really the thing. You don't necessarily need a kid to have blind trust. When I was a kid, it was very clear that there were evil people in the world, that they wanted to hurt people. It was like told to me. And I think I'm happy and adjusted. I'm not paranoid, really. I am careful. So I think kids should have a little bit of that. And that's kind of the thing I liked about it when I was a kid, because there were other cartoons I could have watched. Why did I want to watch the Disney ones? Because they seemed more serious, because there was hardcore stuff happening. There was darker challenges with greater triumphs. And, so I don't know. I'm not always here to defend Disney, but at the same time, I don't think it is exactly what nowadays. You got the Cruella de Vil and Maleficent, and they've just turned everything inside out. That's really where I get like, okay, what have they done?
That's true. That's a really good point. You know what I mean? Like, that's a really good way of putting that. Sidebar, my mother, I'll never forget this either. I had stolen cigarettes from my mother. I think I was like 11 or 12, and I hid them in my closet. And my mother picks me and my sister up from school, and we're driving, and she turns around real serious. She was like, "We got to talk when we get home." And I was like, fuck, she found the cigarettes. She sits us down at the table, and she was like, "Listen, guys, this is very serious. If anybody ever asks you to get in their car or offers you candy to get in their car, do not get in the car." And I was like, okay, what is this all about? She was like, they just found, and it was in our town. She was like, they just found a couple of kids in barrels in the bottom of the river, all that stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. I threw the cigarettes away and I didn't smoke again for another 10 years. But
because that would have given me anxiety. I might have gone and letting them up like, whoa, careful.
I almost said, "I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean to do it," you know what I mean? But yeah, no, so it was awesome, like though. That they actually really, I do commend my mother and her generation for what they did in terms of preparing us for the real world, because I think you got a great point there. Kids are not prepared for the real world in the same way that we were. That's for damn sure.
My dad grew up in the 50s, and he went to law school and found out in law school that pedophiles exist. It wasn't that, he heard about murder, he saw TV, but just the idea of how insane and evil and cruel to each other humanity can get had been slightly veiled. Because they're like, you know what? You got enough problems. There's Vietnam. There's other things going on to worry about right now. We're going to try to let you know people might even murder kids. That might be in a Dragnet episode. But just how crazy criminals can be. And so in criminology, it becomes, it's a lot. So that's another reason I think he told me things. Because he felt just shocked to find out how bad people are. And so many people I know don't think that way. They think, you know what? Most people are trying to be good. All people are trying to do the right thing. Is that true? I know people that don't. I know people that, at least for moments of their life, act vindictively, act out of rage, act out of self-defense, and are willing to sacrifice other people's values, privacy, and right to the pursuit of happiness. So I'm pretty sure that that's something that if one person can do it one time and someone else can do it while they sleep, the entire world can have evil happening simultaneously all the time. So it's worth being aware of evil and to know thyself and to know what you can do. But also, to try to figure out what we can do to make the world a better place. I think it's another aspect I didn't like at CNN is the fear mongering thing. You know, everyone's talking about Don't Look Up. The problem with that movie is on so many levels. And then they say, oh, you just don't get the movie. Like, no, I get the movie in society. You're telling me that the problem is no one's making a big deal about this crisis, right? And like, the crisis is global warming, because they're saying, oh, this thing is slowly coming towards us that Leonardo DiCaprio wants to stop. And if we all did, we could stop it, but you won't be able to see it until it's right in your face. But it also works for COVID, because if you think that no one's making a media sensation hype about this, and it's not just daytime TV saying everything's all right. You know, it's the exact opposite. It used to be that way. So I think that we're in a point where they want blind followers again, but the people that can see through that are, you know, and this is maybe my biggest defense of symbolism in Babylonian propaganda films, and I mean Hollywood, is that you and I have seen through it. And so the fact that the way you talk now is directly because of the symbols you've seen and how you're able to work with them in your mind. And if you take that away from the next generation, they will be more blind to the left hand making movements while the right hand says there's nothing in it, right? And so magic tricks are real, and you need to, you know, learn how they work. So that's my biggest defense, I guess, is how you communicate.
Well put. You know what I'm saying? So while we're on the subject of pedophiles, Ghislaine Maxwell.
So much fun. Yeah, no.
I can't just let it go.
No, it's fair.
But
I mean,
yeah, no,
gosh.
So now this was a big part of the Q movement, was the awakening to the reality that there are elite pedophile networks and all this stuff. And to a certain extent, I do believe that the Q movement was a psychological operation. I think it was meant to keep people busy during a very important time in history, a time when a lot of things were going to have to, by their very nature, be disclosed publicly, and they had to funnel those people that were going to be the most trouble for them in a certain direction and kind of keep them pacified, tell them, trust the plan. Everything's going to be okay. We're taking care of it. And at least that's my take on it. I'd be interested to hear your take on it. But also, what is your take on the timing of the Maxwell case and the Epstein case, all that stuff?
Well, timing is everything, right? I think Joan Quigley was Reagan's astrologer, and Ronald Reagan would never make a speech without his wife's astrologer saying, oh, well, you know, it's a good night for it, because, you know, like we'll do the Iceland Reykjavik nuclear summit because Capricorn and Pluto are eclipsing, which is literally everything. So there's never been a day, I think, that anything has happened in Hollywood that isn't somehow been read by an astrologer. It just makes more sense to do it that way. Both because if you believe in it, you're superstitious about not doing it that way. But even if you don't, if you're just into pure marketing, then marketing with astrology, it's this apophenia. You can add another layer to it, and it makes it more valuable. It's more flavorful as an ad. So in terms of Bernays and psychological movements and Tavistock, you always want to use an excuse. If you can predict the weather, then you can run the world, right? So with the schedule though, you had another half of that question. What was the part right before that? Oh, psychological operations with the awakening movement. Joseph Stalin had a club during the time when he was on his way to power and had been not quite in charge of everything before he gotten rid of Trotsky, not just before Trotsky moved to Mexico, not even when he'd been ice picked, just at the time when they were still working. He started a club called the Anti-Stalinist Club. Stalin started the Anti-Stalinist Club. And that meant that people who were looking to get rid of Stalin would finance and join the Anti-Stalinist Club. And so honeypotting is a very, very Russian bot kind of, skill. But at the same time, people talking about the truth, that's how that happens. You have a few people that say, hey, look what's going on. You cannot trust the government. The election system is rigged. It's getting to be more and more rigged, but it was rigged in the 60s. Even when it was all paper, it was rigged. This is Sinatra, Cosa Nostra, JFK. That's the the real synchronicity there, I say, is that there was a election that was weirdly enough bought by a prohibitionist father. The father of JFK had made so much money. He said, what's the matter if it costs another $1 million or $2 million? And the deals being made with Frank Sinatra and what's his name? Desi Arnaz and his wife, Lucille Ball from I Love Lucy. Everyone thinks that she got in trouble for being told she was a communist because her grandfather was a communist. Her father was a communist. She was a registered communist. And Desi got her out of trouble in public, but it turned out she was having communist meetings going on in her living room. And the connection between the CIA or the OSS and all of these American communist movements, at a certain point, it becomes very convoluted, because when you start to study something, you end up knowing it better than other people. And then they start, like the Weather Underground's connection with the CIA is basically people trying to get recruited for the army told them no. And they said, why? And they gave them a list of reasons they would never join the army. And then the Central Intelligence Agency created a group that they would join, right? So it's very common to create and to try to harness and take over something. I think Proud Boys is another great example. Proud Boys started out by a pretty, flamboyant and fun Gavin McInnes, a drunk and a Scot nonetheless, but not really the idol for the white supremacists, right? Like Richard Spencer or those kinds of people. And he's got like a native wife, and, his kid is half native, and his friends are of all sort, colors and creeds. But the movement itself, you've got people that can go into something and just make it bigger. I've seen this happen with social media platforms. People say, we're going to build a new free social media platform. People come on and then they start spewing stuff. They're like, are you really that anti-Semitic? Like, are you that lame? Like, is that all you care about? I mean, it's okay that you have issues with statism, okay, but like, it gets to a point where it seems suspicious. It's kind of like where someone beats up a homosexual and they jerk off about him on the way home. Like, they have too much love for it. So it seems like there's something there. And I don't trust anybody who says, hey, this movement is the answer. You need to listen. Don't do anything. Just trust the plan. I mean, as soon as you hear trust the plan, it's clearly not the same. So you can say that to someone if you want them to, just believe in what you're doing. But clearly what happened is, and look at with your schedule, you have the disappearance of the issue. And it all happens and culminates with masks again, January 1st, all kinds of sweeping mandates that are starting all over again with new boosters and everything. They couldn't completely do all these things. They couldn't get everything together until they had secured power. And power isn't just being the president. There are so many executive orders. 17, I think, was the first day. And so many things that have happened since then in order to change the judges or to sort of mediate what had been done by the last administration. Because there were some really arguably remarkable things that had been done, which were starting to, like, new life judges is a huge change. And in constitutionalists and removing power from these federal agencies by putting them back into state-run agencies, there's some pretty remarkable things, arguably, that you could say happened. But so many of them have been undone so quickly. So I think that it's probable, if there really was this thing, that it was a fail and a loss. I think it looks like a loss. But some of the most important things from the movement, at least to me, the things that seem the craziest happened. People transitioning in power happened. And the things in the social media applications, I mean, what happened with Jack Dorsey, I think, is remarkable. And I don't think anyone's really completely processed it yet, because so many people just love to hate him and they don't really know what he's going through, what he's had to be up against. I mean, JP Morgan only owned 2% of Morgan and Company. What do you think? That's about the same what's going on with Jack Dorsey. So, and what has he been doing? He's left. He tried to fix America decades ago. He went to Africa. He's trying to do something there where there's a certain amount of freedom. I hate to say it that way, but yeah. I mean, I don't hate to say that they have it. I just hate to say that we don't. But you have to go to Africa if you want to have the chance to build a new free state. So, I mean, there is a lot of transitions of power right now. It seems like the most obvious thing is Americans are starting to wake up to the fact that we are no longer a country. We are a state within the United Nations or whatever Davos system that will emerge afterwards. And this had been clear to many people for decades already. You'd started to see federal immigration judges using federal laws and other federal judges using federal judges using international laws as the case law. Now, the way case law works is they say this has been accepted in a court in Mississippi, so we'll say that it's also constitutionally true here, unless you go international. Then you say, well, it's been accepted by the ICC, so we're going to accept it in America. That is crazy. Like the amount of precedent you set by accepting laws made by other people in a democracy republic is dangerous. And we've been doing it for so long. Also, simultaneously, the virus thing, right? It was the flu shot in 2018 was 11% effective. 2019 was like 8% effective. We've been hearing that. I hope you have. Most people knew that the flu shot was becoming less and less effective. They were trying not to talk about it, but they were saying, hey, let's be real. People taking too much medicine is bad. There were a lot of, maybe it's my mom's a doctor, so I did spend more time hearing this maybe than some, but I hope that I wasn't alone. Most people who have any remnants of this in their minds, they were saying people are taking too many antibiotics. It's making antibiotics resistant. This is how MRSA is coming.
Superbugs.
Yeah, superbugs. There was buzzwords about this. And then we get to a point where they say, hey, the flu shot isn't effective. We need to make another one quicker. And now we're going to be doing boosters using mRNA work, which, I don't know if you saw the Dr. Malone thing, but that's funny. Let's take all of the critical scientists in the world, have a peer review, and then remove the one that disagrees. Boom, 100% of my doctors approve of smoking camels now. It's amazing. It's amazing.
And I thought one of the more interesting parts of that Rogan interview was his idea on mass formation psychosis, which I also think that Peter McCullough had mentioned also, but I might be mistaken, but I think he did mention it also. And and you know what's hilarious? That's the only criticism I've seen of Malone so far is of that particular idea. I saw an article in Forbes that just took him to task on it, although his argument was pretty fucking airtight, and it was ridiculous in and of itself that's what he would be attacked on, by comparing, how dare he compare modern day America to Nazi Germany? It's like, are you asleep or do you not see what's happening? I don't understand.
I love that, because what ends up happening more and more on the Twitter is you have people that are reading these comments that are on their side, and they say, wait a second, but he just was, I don't get this. What's wrong with this? So many people are starting to wake up to that. And for the longest time, Ayn Rand was an example of a book that people talked about. They read the review of Ayn Rand by the anti-Randists, but they never read the book itself. I've got a meme now on my Xirtus Instagram and on Advanced Philosophy memes that is a blue man, and he's got a book that says the blue book about red. And then there's a red hand handing him a red book and says, why not read the actual red book? And then the blue man says, the blue book says it's full of lies. So, most of the time people aren't getting, and so what is the term I used for this the other day? Installed with the appropriate symbology. We need people. So this is a real problem with postmodernism if you want a democracy. And I'm not saying I do or that you ought to. I'm just saying the reason why it doesn't work. And it's about the definition of the word democracy. Democracy has to do with demos. It's a middle, it's a median, it's the majorative oppressing the minority. So if you've got a group that's, in a prison, let's say, and they have someone against the wall and they just go to you and you're the prison guard and they say, hey, we all voted to rape this person. And it was 1 to 100, no, and 100, yes. And so your job as the guard here is to enforce it. Right. So that's what's happened to democracy. Also, a lot of people think that we come from a place of having the same information, and we don't. So many people have heard one story or heard another story. So many people also think that democracy has to do with making logical choices based on the information you have, which is also not the case. It's all about buy this car now, right? Or be part of this group, or don't get FOMO. If you miss out on being part of the blue wave or red wave, vote for the thing. That's where democracy has always been. It's, democracy killed Socrates. They poisoned him. They voted on it. So this whole thing is messed up. But neocracy, nous, right, is the mind. this is Plato's philosopher king idea. And so many people confuse the two because they think, oh, well, America's educating people. So what we'll end up with is a state of philosopher kings. And this was big in the 1800s. They were like, wow, we're all going to read and write 100% literacy. Not the first country to do it. I think Paraguay was 100% literate up until the Triple Alliance War, where they were genocided for it. But we thought, hey, we're going to be philosopher kings and we're going to all have the same information from the same schooling. That doesn't work. We also have new people coming all the time on top of that. But even if you just had the same people all the time, they're going to have different opinions on things based on what has happened to them or where they are in their social stratosphere. And they're also going to be vindictive. It's like if you have a group of people that know that you have a jury that knows that the defendant is guilty, but they sympathize and they're able to declare not guilty. They're able to go against the judge. So we have to be really aware of what we're doing when we're saying we want people to make decisions based on choices. And part of what I've seen is a big divergence from that train of thought on the left and the right. It seems like we're building back this bridge towards the authoritarian state, and that can be Marxist or not, but all it really ends up meaning is that decisions being made by machines or educated people that we agree are allowed to do that. But if we're still using cancel culture to decide who's allowed to, for instance, most people I've heard talk about Dr. Malone only are upset because he was on Joe Rogan. They never heard him before. If they had, because they'd read some about mRNA, they'd forgotten his name. And the fact that he worked on an mRNA vaccine, they can really conflate it with so many other people that they can say he's not that important. Yeah. And then they say,
or they'll say he didn't actually invent it. It's like, well, yeah, no shit. He just invented the technology, laid the foundational groundwork for it, all that stuff. And I feel like people really missed the super important thing about his talk about mass formation psychosis was that the first step had to be that everybody was broken as a community and that they had to be isolated from each other, which the 4 years of Trump laid the groundwork for. And if you're as conspiratorial minded as someone like me, then that had to be a necessary prerequisite. I used to say this all the time, like 2020 could never have happened unless it followed 4 years of Trump. Had they tried pulling that shit during the Obama administration, would not have worked, not in the same way, because everybody would have, even if it was still left-right, they weren't as adversarial at that time. They would have been able to come together more because they wouldn't have been fighting about, oh, he said hydroxychloroquine, and we can't be doing this because Trump did it, and all that stuff like that didn't exist. Even people that hated Obama, still didn't. They still didn't raise many objections when he was, killing an American citizen without a trial in Afghanistan. You know what I mean? So it's like that's what they really missed with that talk. I mean, of course, the other 2 hours and 45 minutes of important information, but I take your point completely.
I feel like I agree with you, but at the same time, I kind of wonder how defensive. Maybe okay, yes, people getting defensive can be very offensive. They get defensive and they become very reactionary. But I also kind of think that so much has been snuck up and secretly implanted, like for instance, the MRSA outbreaks and the SARS outbreak and things that had happened before that had set up precedent for infrastructure. That if Trump hadn't come along, most of those things would have naturally happened. Most old people and kids would have gone along with it. It would have been probably a much smaller movement of people that were reactionarily against it, probably for religious reasons instead of for political distrust. So I kind of still have to give a little
for sure
credence that maybe he was doing things on purpose, but at the same time, he could have been manipulated himself. You've got a guy who's a car salesman and he's pivoting all the time. And he, if you can't stand still, you can be manipulated to move, right? It's the game.
Yeah. I meant more along the lines of, I should have probably said this. It accelerated the timeline. The Trump presidency made the timeline moving up possible, because like if you look in the SPARS document, that they were talking about 2025, you're talking about Agenda 2030. These timelines were
those things are still happening. Agenda 2030 is not and the Davos convention too. But you've got the Club of Rome's computer sequence that said in 2020 we'd start to see this major collapse of population. And so part of the deal is we probably would have had a war, right? If Hillary Clinton had been president, we have North Korea, we have the Uranium One deal, we have things going on. There already are wars. We would have just been part of them. Like Ukraine, what's going on in the EU and what Russia's trying to build. Russia's trying to build an alternative to the EU, and good for them. They should. But it will be a war. And if we're not able to mitigate that, and that was, I think, Trump's biggest power is he's like, I'm going to make a deal, and then Kim Jong-il walks away. He's like, no, I'm going to walk away, and then he's, okay, I'll take the deal. I'll buy the car. So much of it is the art of the deal instead of the art of war, and that was maybe in order to keep us out of war. But then where do we get? Well, then you have a population that has to be sustained, and there's less work being done, and we're automating those systems, but the people that are automating those systems have always planned for 500 million people on the Georgia Guidestones. By the way, again, CNN, Turner, Georgia Guidestones, had to visit that a few times. There's a plan to have a smaller population, not just because it's better for nature, it's better for business. They only want the population to be large because right now they're saturating the value of humanity. And they're saying, you're not worth that much. I can get a hungry person to work. But it won't take a war against each other if you have unless it's a psychological operation war against each other where you pretend that the enemy is this other thing that is transient and it can be inside of you. And we have so many zombie movies, right? This is that idea. Columbus was able to say supposedly that these people weren't human because they're so naive. This is what we could say NPCs aren't human. We're going to say the other side, regardless, is not human enough to show humanity to. So there is a war going on regardless, and people are dying all the time. And it's actually kind of weird how few of them we hear about. It seems like they're saying the virus is killing people. I see people dying in South America. I see disputes going on in Afghanistan. I see a lot more death that they're trying to hide. But at the same time, they're saying, oh, well, so much of the world is safe now. We have so many fewer deaths. We still have problems in Chicago. Los Angeles isn't much safer. San Francisco's gone insane. I don't see exactly the same evidence of that when I look. It seems kind of off. But we're also trying to say, hey, if all these people were to die, then what would be the outcome of that? We would then, if we can't feed people one day, it's not going to be necessarily, according to the Club of Rome calculations, it's not going to be just that we drop off a few people. It could literally just be everyone doesn't eat that day because of the chaos, and then they kill each other. And so you could lose 6 billion people in a day, or in some really quick amount of time. So I do kind of hope that that's what we're trying to mitigate, but I don't feel like that's been permanently put off. It's just that part of the deal is now you're having less kids. And so within a 60-year generation, you will see the Terminator Sean Connor movie version of a war where they just made sure that there were less people. And those people are going to have more cats too. So, and I saw this first in South America. I was like, when is the war coming? Right? Everyone's talking about it. And I just left CNN. It was right after I left CNN. I went down to Argentina and Chile and Peru. And I'm thinking to myself, man, and you hear less. And I had a lot of friends from Israel who were soldiers there. And they're like, there's Nazis down here and stuff. I'm like, really? You look around, you start looking into stuff. And like, where is this war? I'm sorry, I was gonna say when, but you're like, where? When is now, here is where. There's a war going on all the time. It's not the future. There's little tiny wars everywhere, little tiny operations. And then there's also, just you go into a supermarket in Bolivia and you see a lady who's, maybe 3.5 feet tall, 4'10", 11 tops. And above my head is, so there's shelves with rice from the floor to the ceiling, but the rice on the floor that she can grab for the first few rows is all from China. It's got arsenic in it. It's grown in locations where there are nuclear power plants and lead manufacturing and lithium batteries that are destroying everything. And they're soaking the plants in it because the Codex Alimentarius says that you can have humans digest, nuclear waste. So that's going to other countries. And then you go to Bolivia, you still find good rice. You can even find organic rice from Bolivia, but it's going to be on the 6th shelf. It's going to be above my head, and it's going to cost 4 to 7 times what it cost for them to eat. and they cannot afford that. And so you have all these people that were, you can ask that lady who's 4 foot, whatever, how many siblings does she have? She's got 13 or 14 siblings, but how many kids does she have? Like maybe 1 or 2. How many kids do they have? Well, they don't. And this is what's happened in a generation. You've taken a 13, 15 family, everyone was having 15 kids, and turned it down to none. And is that a sustainable thing? Well, in Chile, they had to import 1 million people from Haiti because they don't have the jobs and their birth rate is negative. So the population is dwindling. They have a state as large as Mexico to Alaska with less people than California, and most of them live in one city. So how are they supposed to run it's a predominantly agriculturally driven country without bringing in people? So it's all these, you have to move forward because you can't move left and right, and something's pushing you from behind. And so you're thinking you're making your own choice, but you're being forced. And the war is destroying people at a rate that by the time we realize it, like so many other people already have, wherever they are, it will be too late for us, as it already has been for them.
God damn.
This is a drag, man. I didn't mean to be negative about it, but
no, that's not negative. I mean, you got to see everything for what it is. You know what I mean? It's just a lot. You said a lot. And I'm going to have to process this. And you know what's funny is I don't always listen to my own episodes. I'm going to probably listen to this one 3 or 4 times just to make you win that contest.
Nailed it.
So you know what, Andreas, I am going to wrap it up here, but man, I would love to talk to you again sometime soon. This is absolutely fascinating. And you know what? I'm going to get off this call and I'm going to think of like 5 or 6 fucking questions that I should have asked. And it's just because like right now I'm shell-shocked a little bit. So I am going to need some time to think about this. But
that's
dude,
so incredibly based.
But no, man, you are a different person entirely. You are totally different. And I am so happy that you agreed to come on the show, and I would love to have you on again sometime soon. Where can everybody find all your stuff?
Well, let me also say thank you, because this has been great, and I love your questions, and I love the way you're thinking, and I can't wait to do more shows. This is fun. But yeah, Xirtus, you guys can see there, my Xirtus channel, Xirtus.com, Xirtus on YouTube, Xirtus on Odyssey, Library, all these other things, Instagram, SoundCloud, anything Xirtus. I have also Advanced Philosophy Memes is a Facebook group that we're using to try to tunnel from the other side. Discord server, we got all of the different channels. But go on to Xirtus on YouTube and you can see hundreds of hours of videos. I have playlists about DuckTales and Disney, and just tons of content with tons of cited information about what Disney was doing and all kinds of things like Epcot and Wed Enterprises, and also things on Tartaria if you're interested in history and finding out the truth about the fake news from 100 years ago, because there's a lot of that too. But yeah, thanks again.
Yeah. Oh shoot, dude, I totally forgot about Tartaria. Like that was good. That was on the list of shit we were going to talk about.
Gotcha. No,
it's
worth
there.
It. The thing is, it's so many levels. But the long story short is, since I worked at CNN and I started noticing what fake news is, I started doing, and I've always loved history. I was starting to look back at old history and say, wait a second, these are where's the cited source? This source is a newspaper article about this, but there's another conflicting one. And I know already that this was a psychological operation in the Civil War because some general said it. And I started to realize, wait, fake news becomes fake history. So there's so much fake history to a level that you wouldn't believe. I started to dig back into and find out, for instance, the lost civilization of Tartaria. And you can definitely, if your audience has time, go look at my documentary on it. It's called History Revised. It's on the Xirtus channel. It's like 2 hours long, and it's basically just debunks a bunch of things that you think have to be true, but they aren't, and shows you the alternative and what really happened.
And that will be part 2. All right, Xirtus. Thank you very much, bro. Thank you.
Peace.